when it really comes to any software package, there's normally two ways that you get it. It's either something that you go and do your research for, and then you go out and request and purchase, or it's something that you inherit. Monitoring systems are no different. And in my history, I inherited the monitoring system from my boss, who basically just one day said, here, this is yours, enjoy. And we have a special guest, Ben, who also inherited. Ben, how did you end up getting handed your monitoring solution?
So I really got handed it because the person that was running it, it was a subtask. It wasn't their main focus day to day. And the company saw the need to have a dedicated resource to help massage the monitoring to make sure that everything was tuned in properly.
Okay. So I came from big law. So multiple servers across multiple geos, lots and lots of small offices. What's your infrastructure like?
Kind of the same. We got some big offices, and then we got a bunch of little networks around the country and around the world. Comes down to a few thousand compute devices.
So we basically inherited similar kind of footprints, I guess.
Fairly.
All right. So we've both gone through this inheritance task. What do you think is the very first thing you need to do?
So I think the first thing that you need to do when you're inheriting the monitoring tool is to gain that control. One thing that I ran into was before I stepped in, there was 12 or so people that had admin access to make alerts, make dashboards, edit custom properties, things like that, that really are the key to a solid monitoring system. And it's not that they did it incorrectly, but again, having too many hands in the soup doesn't always make for a good soup. So you want to gain that control and define where does the buck start.
Yeah, I ran into a similar thing where it was handed over to me, and I think we had 6 or 7 people as admins, which you think is fine. But then when people start, customizing views or building new custom properties where we already had existing ones, or, God forbid, duplicating and triplicating alerts that go to everybody, you need to have someone. You need to basically become the CEO of monitoring.
Yeah, and we sort of had the same issue. People were editing dashboards, not realizing that was a global dashboard. So we had network devices that were trying to pull server information. So the load time, when you would click on the node, the load time for that screen to pop up on your computer could be an extra 30, 40, 50, 60 seconds. And while that time may not seem that critical, I mean, what's 30 seconds? But in the midst of a crash, in the midst of an issue where it's all hands on deck type of thing, 30 seconds, let's face it, can seem like forever.
Yeah, especially when people are breathing down your neck, or worst case scenario, when your email just keeps chirping saying, hey, more is down, more is down, more is down. Any delay like that it just slows down the overall process.
When I became the monitoring guy, for lack of a better term, I really set the rules of engagement forward. I said, look, this is how we're going to alert. This is how we're going to do things. This is how I see it best. Now, it's not just me saying and we're doing. It's me asking for input from my end users, my customers, because quite frankly, I'm not the one digesting all these alerts. I'm setting them up and they're getting them. But when the alert goes off at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm not the one waking up. So I found it very prudent to get the buy-in also from my customers as far as the rules of engagement when it comes to monitoring.
You and I had a talk, it's probably been about 6 months now. And we both ran into a problem in our organizations where we had to pull the switch, flip the trigger. I don't know how we want to phrase this. We had to basically make the absolute worst decision ever. And what did we call it? I think we referred to it as nuking monitoring from orbit.
Yep.
So
nuking monitoring.
What led you to that decision?
So it wasn't an easy decision. Again, there was nothing wrong with what the previous admins have done with it. But with the advancements of the Orion platform, even over the last year and a half, it became very obvious that we needed to kind of just back up and refit and go back at it. So I talked with my boss, I talked with my director, we talked with key stakeholders, and I said, look, we have these Orion products, and when we first purchased Orion, we bought NPM, and then we bolted on SAN, then we bolted on, NPM, SCM, all the different tools kind of got bolted on, right? So what I want to do is kind of approach it in a holistic view and say, okay, well, here's all the products. How do we get them really tuned in to make them effective? And that's when the call came, yeah, we need to do that. Also looked at things like we had over 200 and some alert definitions. And those queries hitting the database, every 1 to 5 to 10 minutes, the performance of my database was just struggling so hard because keep in mind, each alert equals an SQL query to the database.
Yeah, and depending on the number of results that come back, it could kick off one or more trigger actions, and then it just keeps escalating.
Snowball.
Yeah, and the problem is that's a great example, because if you add an alert and it has 2 actions, and even if it polls once a minute, it's not that big a deal on a small to medium-sized environment. But that's only one alert. When you start talking about 20, 30, 50, 100 alerts that are all active, that stuff really kind of adds to the list, and it makes monitoring the monitoring so much of a priority that you kind of get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
So I think planning in advance, like what alerts do we keep, what reports do people actually read, what dashboards do we have to rebuild, is really important when you actually have to make the decision, be like, that's it, we've got to start over, we got to burn it to the ground, and we got to build fresh and new.
And that's the one thing that I made the decision on, was I didn't want to carry over anything.
Mm-hmm. You did a full cut.
A full, just a new database, new servers, new everything, because what I'm trying to gain from this is better utilization. I can send out all the alerts all day long, but if the application team isn't responsive to them, what's the point? Why am I doing all this? So I took the time to get away from plain text emails and make HTML code, because people like pretty.
Yeah.
I cleaned up the database. I'm trying to get rid of the nodes as they become decommissioned. We're trying to get rid of them as fast as possible, because again, one less node. And when you're talking about having an environment of 14,000 plus nodes, which isn't that bad, but then you look at the element counts of almost 100,000 elements, the numbers start adding up real fast.
Okay, Ben, you talked a little bit about how you had to rebuild from scratch. What led you to that decision, and how did you get people on board?
So really, it came to that decision because during a yearly health check, I noticed we were kind of in the middle. It wasn't a terrible monitoring system. It wasn't the best monitoring system. I looked at the demands that were being asked of the monitoring system, and I knew that where we were was going to carry us much forward. So I really just walked into my boss's office and I said, look, this is where we are. These are the demands you're making of me. We need to get here. I can get us here, but we need to kind of reevaluate the monitoring. And so it became easiest way is just to pull the plug and start from scratch and really build out the solution for tomorrow, not for today.
I think I had a similar discussion, except mine was, I don't think you built this right. And mine was a little easier sell.
Again, ours was built fine. It was chugging. It was doing its job. But again, there's a huge difference between okay and good.
Yep.
And personally, being responsible for the application, I don't settle for okay. I don't think anyone really wants to settle for okay.
No.
We want to settle for great. We want to settle for the best. So that's really where I'm trying to push this monitoring solution at the company to say, hey, this is where we were. This is where we're at, and look at the difference, whether it's return of investment in dollars in our pocket because the system didn't go down, or whatever that tangible result is. That's the key win.
When you take over monitoring, whether it's by inheritance or when you actually do it yourself, you kind of have to, and you mentioned a little bit, we kind of have to prove it a little bit to the environment. You talked about how you put in a dozen servers and then you expanded that out a little bit and you went more and you're adding more and more. And you have plans to include other people in as well. But how much of that, does that ever end, or is it a constant cycle?
I think monitoring is really a constant cycle, because as new things get added to your network or removed from your network, you really need to adjust how you're monitoring that. Whether you're introducing a different kind of SD-WAN solution or a new type of server, new program, the businesses are always moving forward. And that's the one beauty about IT is our day-to-day is never the same, right? By the time we're done talking here, technology has gone five or six more steps ahead of us. So now the monitoring is what you really need to prove. So I don't think there's ever a good kick up and put your feet on the desk type of solution to monitoring, because in monitoring, you got to be thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead, because if you're not, that next outage, you might have been able to prevent.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of that comes with actually having touch point meetings. It's the monitoring engineer actually getting up from their desk, going into a room, or getting on a call like this, and just having a conversation, being like, these are the alerts I want to turn on. And alerts are not monitoring. Monitoring is a completely separate thing than alerting, but that's a different discussion. But this is what we're monitoring. This is what we'll alert you on. These are the reports that come out of the box. What would you like to see? And then having that kind of meeting on a certain cadence, whether it's monthly, weekly, quarterly, whatever. It's, you kind of have to have those follow-ups, especially with the stakeholders, the one that gave you, if you do, build from scratch again, especially the stakeholders who gave you the thumbs up in the first part.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I'm trying to get into place now. And it's kind of it's a little more difficult given the current situation we're in, but I'm trying to get those type of meetings in place. Right now I have them weekly with my manager and my director, but we're looking to expand that to be more key, to have more key stakeholders. So we're actually looking at forming what we're calling a monitoring committee. Mm-hmm. So it involves our incident management, involves our help desk, involves the main application owners to say, okay, this is what we can do. What do you want? How often do you want it? And how do you want it delivered? Because, there's a difference between delivering an alert through an email or some sort of paging system, or do you just need a report ran? Because not everything has to be an alert. You can always just do, hey, here's your weekly report of how many systems rebooted this week, or whatever that might be.
We talk a lot, obviously. We've met on Thwack, we've met in person a couple of events and stuff like that. But Thwack is one of those resources that I think may be underknown for especially people that are inherited. Because if you were bought it, and if you bought the solution and you were working with SolarWinds and you spoke with our people and you read up on us, then you know about it. But if you were just handed it, did you know about it? Like for me, I honestly didn't know Thwack existed for 6 months after I was handed the solution.
Same boat. I didn't know about Thwack the first few weeks, maybe a couple months I was there. But when I found it, man, let me tell you, and I'm not, this is no shameless plug for Thwack, but let me tell you, the blinders came off, because now I'm not just the monitoring guy. Yes, I am the monitoring guy at my company, but I have connections to people like you and so many other experts that have been doing this, for the collective, we collect it all up and add it thousands of years, if you think about it. Mm-hmm. And it's a place where you can come with your ideas and really not be embarrassed to ask that question, because I can't think of how many times, Kevin, I hit you up and said, hey, I'm having a brain fart. How do I do this? And you're like, bro, right here. I'm like, oh yeah, no duh. Because we all have those days, especially when you're sitting in your, you've been working on an alert for 8 hours and it's just not kicking off the way you want to kick off. Yep. You can look at Thwack and maybe you look at the content exchange, maybe that alert you're busting your butt over might already be on the content exchange.
Yeah,
download
someone's
it,
already built it for you.
Import it, and you're done. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you just, make it pretty.
Make it pretty.
I've always found it interesting, the number of people and how quickly their skills move. And especially if you're something like your background is systems and networking, my background is systems and networking, and I'm an accidental DBA, but I had zero problem posting like really what I felt were elementary DBA questions on there, because that wasn't my day job. Yeah. But no one ever made me feel less for asking what I thought was a beginner question. And I got great resources and stuff like, the content exchange and the alert lab and the report lab and the SDK forums and just the feature request to be like, oh, cool, they're already working on this. Great. Or no one said this. Why has no one found this thing? I totally want to make a recommendation. So you build a feature request and get all of your buddies to vote on it. And then the product team looks at that when they're deciding the next release.
Yeah. And I think the one good case story I have personally, not to blow my own horn here, but, I had a problem where systems were down for 6 months. And so I remember going to Thwack and I found something on Thwack that was sort of kind of what I was asking. Like I wanted something that would just automatically say, okay, this has been down for X amount of days, let's take these actions. But I wanted to make it a little more advanced. I wanted to actually make it into an alert that would say, hey, I'm killing this node off, let's do it. So, and I think that's where you and I connected really heavily was, this idea came to me literally at an amusement park.
I remember you telling me that.
I emailed you. I said, hey, Kevin, here's my idea. By the time I left the amusement park, you already had it through your lab. We had it rock and roll, and within, what, a week, 2 weeks maybe?
Yeah, I think you had an introduction in 2 weeks.
Yeah. In a full-blown environment. So if you think about Thwack, here's, from idea to concept to actionable item, that was maybe 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the power of Thwack comes. That's why I tell people that are coming to monitoring, the power of Orion is really nested in the community of Thwack.
Yeah. And for something like that, I've said it before, it's almost like emotional support. It's you go there and maybe you described it one of those just horrible days. You've been working 8 hours staring at this alert and you just can't fathom why it's not doing the thing you want. And then maybe you just get that really small, and on the grand scheme of things, it's a very small win by going to Thwack and finding something. But that kind of thing can save your day. That's one thing you've totally accomplished, and you're like, that's a check mark off my list, one less thing I've got to do.
Well, one big victory I had recently was when I was rebuilding my system, I didn't have to rebuild all these dashboards one by one by one. Mm-hmm. Went to Thwack, found the script where I can export all the views from the old system and import them into the new system. Now, there was some legwork I had to do. Like I redefined some custom properties and things like that. But to make those minor changes within the SQL queries was a lot less time intensive than having to sit there and rebuild dashboards. So like for the most part, most of my users, when they logged into the new system, they really didn't see much of a difference other than the speed. But the dashboards, the familiarity they had was there. And I think that made the transition a little bit smoother.
Okay, Ben. So if you had to tell somebody where to get started today because they were just handed a monitoring solution, what's their first step?
Your first step is getting on Thwack. Get part of the community. Learn your craft. Become weaponized to answer those questions. Sign up for the academies. Start working on your certification. Start asking those questions. Again, get on Thwack and ask whatever question that is. Don't get caught up in the whole noob status. We're all noobs at one point in time. So ask your questions because I've been there. I know, Kevin, you've been there as well.
Yep. So
if you're feeling that, know that you're not alone. Ask those questions and really get out to the community. You can find me on Thwack at _Ben_Keen. If you have any questions about possibly going nuclear in your environment or you just need to vent about something, I just ask, give me 24 hours to get back to you because, day jobs.
Yeah. We can't all have the privilege of having a day job on Thwack like some people.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah. So if you need to reach me, I'm KM Sigma. We will take any and all questions. And honestly, we'll probably end up redirecting you to something that someone else already wrote because sometimes the original storytellers are just the best. Ben, thank you so very much for making time. It's always a pleasure talking with you. And I look forward to see you in person, hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon.